Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our third session for our eDiscovery conference. Thrilled to have you here. I'd like to have the Effective Search from Keywords to AI panel join me right now. This is really a dynamic group, and it's a dynamic presentation you're going to hear. Clearly, search is what makes eDiscovery different from other kinds of manual review. And with that, Rose Jones from King & Spalding, a partner in that firm in their Atlanta office and a global maven. Would you take over and with your panel, Rose? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Bill. It's been an honor to be a part of the U.S. Law eDiscovery Conference for the past several years. This one has been fantastic so far. I'm really excited about this panel. I think you'll see we have an amazing group of experts. But I want to say, Bill, thank you so much. You've been a role model and a mentor for all of us. This has just been a really fun team to be a part of. So, as I said, I'm honored to moderate this panel. These experts are fabulous. We'll start with Joy Morale, and she has been referred to as the eDiscovery guru, but I like to call her the eDiscovery diva. Joy's really making moves in our industry. She has law firm and corporate experience. She now owns her own company, and she provides that same quality work to attorneys, client support, government agencies, corporate legal departments. Not only that, but she's been recognized by her peers as an eDiscovery expert business leader. She's received the Relativity Innovation Award. She has been listed as one of the 100 most influential Filipino women in the world, and
it's okay, it was too long anyway.
No, there was more. All right, looks like we lost Rose, but I can take over. Joy has been a part of the eDiscovery community for many years. We are often pleased and lucky to be able to run into her at conferences, and you should definitely seek out her wisdom if you ever have questions or need a little bit of guidance, both from a practical and a legal perspective. Of course, Tom O'Connor needs virtually no introduction. Tom, are you there? I can't quite see your view. Oh, all right. All right. Tom, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm an independent litigation support consultant. I've been doing this for more years than I will admit to on a public platform, and work mostly in the eDiscovery space in document exchange protocols and determining what tool is the best fit for the data, and so that's sort of my contribution here today.
Thank you, Tom. We're so lucky to have you. George, would you like to introduce yourself? I think most folks here probably know you, but for those who don't.
Sure. I am George Sosha. I currently am Senior Vice President of Brand Awareness with Reveal. I co-founded EDRM back in 2000, and I forget now, 5, I think it was, and have spent about 30 or so years working in the eDiscovery trenches in a variety of different ways.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's a storm going on in the southeast, and my suspicion is that storm has affected Rose's ability to come in. She was also running the PowerPoint. We're going to try and get that reloaded and launched differently. Maybe if I could ask the panel to kind of begin their presentation, and then I'll pop back in once we have your PowerPoint loaded, if you'll permit me. Okay, thank you.
Bill, I've put up the PowerPoint for us.
Oh. Great, I didn't know you had it. George, can you operate it?
That I can, I hope.
All right. Well, why don't you take over then until Rose is able to rejoin us.
Okay, just have to move a couple things around here so I can actually see what is going on. It's always that challenge. The panel today, we are covering a range of topics from keyword searching all the way through different types of AI. And excuse me a second while I try to pull up yet another thing and move it to another location. There we go. Okay, talking about different types of AI and how we can make use of them, different types of keyword and how we can make use of them. And where we want to start, I think, is with the broad question of what is AI again? At which point, if we were following script, Rose would ask me, George, can you explain what we mean by keyword searching and what we mean by AI? So I'll start with just a very brief description, and then with that, I'll hand it back over to Rose, who has once again joined us.
So I totally jinxed myself today, guys. So do you mind giving me back so I can share the screen?
I can do that in just a second.
Awesome, thank you. So I will tell you guys, my child's school system, they preemptively canceled school because of a storm that was coming, and so I think I jinxed myself this morning when I was making fun of them, and so of course I lost internet service. So there you go. But anyways, let me get the slides back up for you guys. All right. Here we go. So I was saying about Christine. So Christine has actually a Law 360 article where she proposed a new framework for legal technology assisted review and how to use it in civil litigation. It's really garnered a lot of attention, and so if you have not had a chance to read that, you really should. She's also recognized by her peers as a leader, and she's highly commended for strategy and e-discovery by the Financial Times Innovative Lawyers Awards, and she's also received the Volunteer of the Year Award by the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing. And so then we have George Socha, who thankfully was going to take over for me. He's incredibly impressive in his knowledge and in his career. He's an award-winning attorney. He serves as an expert witness, and you may have heard of a little thing called the EDRM. It's kind of a really important chart in what we do, and he co-founded the EDRM back in 2005. George is also a leading expert. He's a top 100 leading legal consultants and strategists, and he's also been recognized as a top technology innovator and influencer. So we are very excited. Today, our goal is to provide you guys with some practical tips based upon our experience on how technology can assist with the ever-growing explosion of data and data sources. So individuals and companies, they all leverage multiple data sources every day. And these data sources may contain the evidence that you're going to need. And so it's really important for you to understand the potential data sources and how to get to that evidence. And so that is our goal. And so with that, we will kick it off. So George, can you explain to us the difference between keyword searching and AI? And when we say that, what do we mean by that?
These are both ways in which we use technology to try to find information. In order for either of these to work, we've got to have the information. It's have to have been indexed and available to us through any number of different tools. Keyword searching, it's actually searching for strings of text and characters. We tend to call it keywords. Sometimes we search for terms. Sometimes we search for things that aren't key at all, but it's searching for strings of text, and there are different ways of connecting those strings together to look for that text in the content. We will search the text of documents, email messages, and the like. We also can use keyword searches to search metadata, critical information we need to do all of this. AI, the tongue-in-cheek version of AI, it's the use of any technology that seems like magic. And once it doesn't seem like magic anymore, it's not AI anymore. A more accurate description is that it's typically in e-discovery arena, one of three types of technologies that we're bringing to bear. It is machine learning. If you hear about TAR, that's a form of machine learning called supervised machine learning. We also have unsupervised machine learning, concept search and the like. Natural language processing, we typically use that in e-discovery circles with text to do things like sentiment analysis, emotional analysis, and so on. We also can use natural language processing to help recognize speech and convert the speech over to text we can work with. The third area we use to a much lesser extent in eDiscovery is computer vision, working either with images or video and using technology to label that visual content, give you searchable text, and once you've got that searchable text, whether it's through natural language processing, computer vision, whatever, you can keyword search it. You can use it with machine learning as well. You can use it in any number of ways. One area we do not tend to touch on in eDiscovery, the fourth major category of artificial intelligence, is robotics. One day we'll focus on that more. For now, we don't.
Thanks, George. And Tom, from your perspective, how much does case size determine which tools we should be using?
Well, it's a major factor, of course. If you have a $50,000 case, you're not going to spend $100,000 on a software tool or a vendor partner or a consultant like myself. It's simply not feasible to do that. So that's always been a factor. FRCP 1 requires us all to handle cases in a manner that's just, speedy, and inexpensive, and so we have to take that into account. But it's not the only factor. And I just ask people to keep in mind, and you heard Kelly Twigger mention in the session just before ours, that factors like document collection, where are the documents, who's doing the collection, how big are the data sets, what are the different document types, and what unique challenges do they present. One tool may not work for all of them. We'll talk about some of these factors as we go along. And of course, time frame. What's your time frame? It may vary. U.S. District Court down here in New Orleans has suspended jury trials due to COVID. So those sorts of factors are going to affect what your tool is and how fast you need to turn things around to make a motion, answer discovery requests, appear in court, etc.
And so, Tom, do you think that AI really is a standard application these days?
No, not at all. You just heard George talk about some of the various iterations, and I think that's the big thing, is you need to take a look at the tool you're looking at, tools that you're looking at, and decide which of those factors may apply to you. And as I said, it may vary from document type to document type. George co-wrote a great article in the, I'm not sure if I'll get the publication right, but it was the Young Lawyers Division of the ABA in their publication in February, I believe, of this year. George, you can correct me if I get the details wrong. It's called How Changes to eDiscovery Can Help You in Your Practice. And he talks in more detail about those different criteria that he just mentioned. And I'd highly recommend that people look at it, and also mentions, don't forget, in the right data set with the right size, that keyword search can be effective. And also he mentions another very big factor that I think you need to keep in mind is algorithm bias. Each one of these tools has underlying algorithms. They're all different, and you need to understand, at least at some basic level, how those work to make sure you're getting the best results for your case. So take a look at George's article. It's really well done and talks about those distinctions.
So Christine, what are some common mistakes that you see that folks are making when they're trying to negotiate search terms?
All right, so obviously we're going to be talking about different types of technology that have developed and are pretty sophisticated and amazing in the way that they help us. They are magic, but search terms remain one of the key tools that we still use in a major way to help us, sort and call. And that said, a lot of times I see folks using search terms in a really clunky way that doesn't help much. We've put up here on the screen a sample of a search term I might see. This is not really much of a search term I'm no Boolean expert. There are folks you can engage to help you design amazing search terms, but we tried to kind of put together an example of something that's kind of typical that I see. But there's so many ors, there's so many ands, involved. Anytime you see the name of a litigant involved in a search term, you know that it's going to be trouble. But recently we had a case where we're, dealing, a premier firm had been dealing with 200 terms and returning 6 million hits, and we were really struggling to figure out where the problem was. I took a look at the terms, and they were all like this, and once we had a secretary actually break them all down, we had 9,000 terms. Only maybe 100 of which were actually problematic. So in this example that you see on the screen, perhaps it's really only the word Atlanta that is causing the problem, and everything else would be fine. But you're not going to know that until you break them down and run them independently. Otherwise you're just looking at something that is confusing and big and intimidating.
And so, Christine, if you're trying to negotiate search terms with the other side, what are some things that you can do to stay on track?
Yes, so we could talk about search terms for a whole 2-day conference, but here's my 30-second tips on how to stay in good hygiene with your search terms. All right, so one is deduplicate all of your hit rates. A lot of times I hear people talking about hit rates, and they say, well, we have 11 million hits. And I say, well, you only have 5 million documents. So what does that tell you? And so you really have to know, especially if you're negotiating with the other side, everybody has to be on the same page about what we talk about, what we mean when we say a hit. Is it a deduplicated hit? So we're talking about retrieving one document with a search term. Or are we saying that one document has the appearance of a term 5 times, which would count as 5 hits? Because I don't really care about the latter type of example. I care about the former. I want to know how many documents I'm going to be left with after application of the hits. So go ahead and deduplicate and make sure that everybody knows what counts as a hit and that you're using the same language and the same approach. Then second, go ahead and break down those long strings. I know that, in certain jurisdictions, you're only allowed to have maybe 25 terms, and so certain people try to jam as many different terms into the 1 through 25 spots as they possibly can. But that doesn't really help you if you're trying to understand burden or if you're trying to understand where false positives are coming in. All right, and then the third tip I've got for you, this is something I call the lockbox method, and every time I do, everyone thinks I'm crazy because nobody's ever heard of it. So maybe I need to write this down and publish it and let people take fire and aim at it. But I don't think that you should continually run agreed terms. And what I mean is, say everybody agrees that you're going to run the term, Atlanta Airport. Maybe that's a really important term in your case, and there's just no disputing the fact that you're going to run it. Okay, go ahead and run that term across your data set. Take all the documents retrieved by that term and put them aside. Then just go ahead and continually run the disputed terms to see how many documents those retrieve. And the reason you would do that is because if you continually keep running the agreed terms, or at least the ones you know for sure you're going to do, maybe perhaps you haven't conceded that yet, but take them out so that you can actually see where your disputed documents lie, right? So you don't want to know how many you have to run. You already know that. Go ahead and take them out and just run the disputed terms. So those are my 3 tips for how to have better search term hygiene if you don't hire an expert consultant such as Tom. All right.
Thanks, Christine. So Joy, can you share a situation where you can deploy both keywords and AI?
Yeah, I was going to talk about it even more upstream in regards to, I think everyone does keywords for, like you said, negotiating search terms, trying to get through and finalizing your ESI protocol and move towards just starting discovery. But upstream, when you're actually doing internal investigations, when the event or the trigger has happened, talking to custodians and making sure that you are preserving the right amount of data, making sure you are searching things outside of email, for example, document management systems that store things in the structured format that might have different ways. So you might have to lean on keywords. So you're going to have to figure out and interview more with the custodians. Again, mentioning, I think that sample had the word contract on it, but it didn't have agreement and it didn't have the letter K, and nor can you even index search one letter K, right? Usually you have to have 3 letters or more. But that being said, when you are working from the corporate side and preserving data, we typically over-preserve, right? And in that sense, so I would use, when you go a little bit further downstream after collection or preservation, is to test those terms that you want to use yourself for quick peek. If you are the attorneys or inside, you want to start to figure out, do we have a case? What is our risk, right? You should be doing those keyword searches earlier to, you know what you're looking for, so use those and then expand. For AI, I tend to look at things when we figured out what we have and we want to expand it. I mean, when I go to Google and I know what restaurant I'm going to go to, I type in the name of the restaurant. If I don't know what I want to eat, I'm going to type in, restaurants near me, right? So think about what you're trying to achieve. And so I think AI has been great in regards to, like George mentioned, the different kinds in regards to like computer-assisted review versus clustering and categorization, things that can actually take your keywords and kind of make them blossom, right? Because you start with something very, very specific and it just kind of grows, and you start to get some insight because it starts to show you the word wheels or the associated words. So I think the situation specifically would be investigations, quick peeks. Again, as you're negotiating after deposition and you come back, run those terms or words and then try and see what else is in there, because maybe there is an additional custodian you have to pull. Maybe there are enhanced terms you need to add to and negotiate. So those would be some of the situations I'd use keyword and AI.
Thank you, Joy. So George, when we're using Boolean searches, we're looking for things that we think we know are there. So are there tools that can tell me something that I don't know, and like how could we leverage that in this process?
Very much so, but I'd like to comment quickly on the discussion we've just been having. One of the challenges, you see it on that slide 6 with all those terms, that's a short list of terms all combined into one. Sometimes those lists run for pages. Yeah, different review platforms have different capabilities. One of the things some of the review platforms let you do is that the review platform itself will break down this construct and tell you what each of those words or terms delivers back separately. Some of the review platforms also let you use much more reliable ways of constructing a query like this, so that you don't need to figure out when to open a paren, close a paren, put in or versus and where. You can follow easier to use approaches on that. That said, let's jump to the imaging, image labeling slide, because this is an example of some of the additional things that are achievable when you go beyond trying to just work with text. One of the very first conferences I worked on, one of the e-discovery conferences, one of the questions was, what do we do about video? What do we do about photos? And the answer was, well, not much, because there wasn't much we can do. The world has moved on. There are capabilities within some platforms using AI to identify components within photographs, and this is an example. The AI involved here looked, so to speak, at this photo, concluded that there was a 90% chance that this was about housing, 90% chance about a building, 85% chance included bricks, and so on. It labeled that image with these various tags, if you will. Once those tags are in there, they are text tags. Now you can apply all the search capabilities you have and all the TAR and other capabilities you have to this content as well. So it takes what otherwise is unsearchable content as a practical matter and puts search capabilities at your disposal.
So what if I have different or multiple languages, George? How would I deal with those?
Once again, AI can be your friend in this. There are a number of ways of approaching this problem. You can, of course, send content out to be manually translated, and sometimes that is the best way to accomplish your objective. You can, however, use any of a number of different tools to do machine translation. This is an example here. The document on the left is in, if I remember correctly, Korean, and you see the Korean view of it. For me, at least, I can't even tell what language this is looking at it, to say nothing of read it. The right-hand side is the machine, the AI-driven machine translation of that content. That is available as searchable text. So once again, whatever methodology you're using for searching content, once it's been converted to searchable text, you can apply that. So the AI is figuring out how to make that content more reachable for you. And a related issue, if you go to the next slide, is that there are times when you have people for whom that language is their native language. You need to bring in, for example, with this example, this slide, people who are native French speakers and for whom maybe English isn't their strongest language. Some of the platforms give you the ability to do what's called localization, or convert the controls in the platform, or translate the controls in the platform over to any of a number of different languages. This is an example of what that looks like when that happens.
And let's just walk through concept visualization. I think it'd be helpful if we walk through these different searching types, and then Tom and Christine and Joy can chime in with some of their experiences.
Sure. Here is an example of what you find, again, in a number of different platforms in various different ways. It takes this is, to step back, AI, machine learning, supervised machine learning, unsupervised machine learning. This is the unsupervised machine learning part of it. You take the content, tell the system, AI system, go do stuff with that content. You don't tell it, I like this, I don't like that, any of that. Just do stuff with it and report back what you find. Here, we've got what's called a cluster wheel. There are various iterations of this type of capability out there. It takes the content and groups documents with conceptually similar content together. You can drill down in greater and greater detail. You can eventually navigate over to the documents themselves. It's a useful way of exploring when you don't know what you're looking for, because the system doesn't care. It doesn't have any preconceptions. It's just giving you what it sees and then letting you drill down and explore and work through to try to find the things that you decide might be useful.
And before we move on to the next concept or topic, Tom, I'd be curious to know from you, who should be using these tools? So should the client or the attorney? How should these be used?
Well, I'll prove categorically that I was a lawyer in a former life, trial lawyer, by saying the answer to that is depends. A lot depends on where the documents are. Obviously, if you're talking to your client and the client has the documents on their site, it may be easier to work with them and have them do the culling, the sorting, the collecting, self-collecting, as we discussed in the prior session. But if you're receiving those documents in the course of litigation, if it's production to you, they're going to go to the lawyer first, who's probably going to do some of that work in-house, depending on the size of the firm and the technical expertise of the firm, or may have a partner. They may call somebody like George or myself and say, we need some help. What do we do with that? So it really does depend on the case-by-case definition of what's going on. Who's got the documents? How are they being produced? And where are they located?
So I like to think that I have emotional intelligence, but I don't think that's what you're talking about here, George. So can you explain this one?
Well, it's not quite, but close to it. But I'm going to respond to a couple of questions that have come up. One of them is, what is the cost of running a search term?
Oh.
And generally, once you have data in a platform and you're using the platform, there should not be an incremental cost, at least with respect to the platform, of running the search term. There might be quite a cost in terms of the time it takes to figure out what search term you want to run, and then quite a cost looking at the results of it. But running the search term shouldn't be a cost. And because there was a question about this, the screen captures I'm using are all from Reveal's platform, because that's the one I have access to. Emotional intelligence here is using AI capabilities to try to find things where the content of the communications indicates anger, for example, or excitement, or anxiety. In this instance, that type of capability is used to find those types of things, and then it's presented up here as a way of telling you what you might be looking for in there. So part of what happens is that with this type of approach, the platform is trying to figure out what Tom does day in, day out, who he's communicating with on a regular basis, what his tone of voice is like, how angry he typically gets or doesn't get in his communications. And then it's looking for anomalies. Where are things different? And for years it sees Tom and me communicating just during business hours, everything's calm, cool, collected, and then suddenly there are messages back and forth between Tom and me. They are not cordial. Not by any means. He's at my throat, I'm at his throat, and it's not business hours. It's at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Now we've got a problem. So it's using the technology to try to find that type of things, those anomalous activities, including ones where, for example, there is anger or concern or anxiety.
Going back to the question of cost for running a search term, I'm curious, Christine or Joy, do you guys have any comments on that?
Yeah, I was going to say just it matters in regards to what system you're actually doing the search in, right? So if you're in Office 365 and you have your email in there and you're running searches through either the front interface of just email or the eDiscovery Center, the Compliance Center, right? There are going to be tools available to you, but just recognize the limitations of them. For example, do you have PDFs that are not searchable? They're just images. Is the system OCRing them? Making sure that you understand, again, what are some of the reserved characters. If your case hinges on 3% or a percentage symbol and they don't index and you can't search percent symbols, that could be an issue too. But the cost, I just want to put to everyone out there that things now are transactional. You don't have to purchase a entire system for $200,000 now, right? You can go and have your case and talk to different companies. And I would do demos of them, right? Because there's going to be a difference in interface. There's going to be availability of different search tools like George is showing you. So just know and understand what your case is, what did you agree to, what do you have to do. So that's where the price is going to vary, right? Is on the size and then what tools you're using. And again, what's included or not included in those platforms for you. So I would do that kind of shopping. I
think that's right. And, especially for outside counsel, you're often going to end up with a client-selected platform, either because they have a long-term relationship with a vendor or because they have invested and brought in, those types of tools in-house. And so, the cost is, there's no cost to hitting the button. The cost is really associated with the hourly time that is going to surround making sure you know what you're doing. I've seen vendors that push through audio and video files as exceptions and just kind of leave them in an exception bucket that wouldn't not necessarily be subject to search terms, even though you can absolutely run, as George has shown us, search terms across audio, video, photos, either because of the metadata that is inherently in there or because of you've applied some sort of tool. If you have a bunch of jumbled search terms that take forever to parse apart, that is more time either that the outside counsel is spending or that a consultant at the vendor is spending. So it's not like, when we used to send text messages and it would cost us 10 cents per text message. It's not like that anymore. But the more complicated and the uglier your search terms are, and the less that if you don't understand your data very well, then the client will end up paying significantly for the search terms, but it's going to be in hourly fees.
And if you don't construct your search terms well, it's going to cost you more downstream in the review, right? You're going to end up having a lot more down there in attorney hours. So
I think just to interject too, as a note, I believe, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong here, that Judge Johnston said in that decision that was referenced in the prior session that some of the sanctions that he gave for what he thought were high costs in searching that was done was due to sloppy sculpting or structuring, if you will, of the original search term. So what you do at the front end can just cascade downhill in terms of huge costs for you as the case goes along.
That's exactly right, Tom. And George, we have a question on the emotional intelligence. And so from the audience, are these patterns identified without reviewer intervention, or does someone have to train the AI what anger looks like?
It's at least in the platform I'm familiar with, and the one I can talk most knowledgeably about, it is a combination. To a certain extent, it is using supervised machine learning to have users train the system. That can be set up at the very beginning of a matter. You can set up issue tags, for example. You could set up a tag that says, anxious, whatever you might want. And each time you tag something as having that characteristic, the system recognizes that, looks at that content, and tries to figure out, is there more like this out there? So this is the find more like this capability. There are, however, there isn't a need to start from scratch every time. You can build or take advantage of pre-existing AI models where this work has been done already on a large volume of data. And so it's not just looking at the content from your case, but looking at content from other matters as well, so that the system has a richer understanding of what anger is. And at that point, you can tell the system, here's a new case, here's new data. I'm not going to train you on anything yet. Just go out and tell me what in that system shows anger.
So I have another really good question, and Christine, this is for you. So this is again from the audience. Could you expand on why it's problematic to have the litigant's name in the search terms?
It's problematic to have a litigant's name in the search terms depending on which litigant and where you're running your terms, right? If you are representing a company called Acme and opposing counsel is asking you to run the word Acme through Acme's data, it's likely to return every single document in the data set. Either because if you're running an email, you're going to be picking up signature blocks, or you might be picking up something in the metadata like, Acme files, file share. Now, if I'm asking if I represent Acme and I'm asking opposing counsel to run the word Acme through their files, now that might be appropriate, right? Because perhaps they only had one business transaction with Acme that would be the subject of the lawsuit. Okay, that's likely to pick up pretty relevant files, and that might be appropriate. So really it's going to be dependent upon who you're representing and where you're running the proposed search term.
And I think that brings up a really good point, Christine, about understanding where, because you don't have just one bucket of search terms and then you just have to say everything. You can actually triage or isolate, this goes with this set of group or custodians, or this issue is this and that. So you can break those up and run them as they're as appropriate.
Yeah, and I think also another important factor to look at is, look at your noise words. So if someone's last name is Must, right, M-U-S-T, you're going to get a lot of false hits. So you really just need to pay a lot of attention to your terms and think about the results, and are they what you intended them to be. So But let's move on. I want to talk about related people because I think, again, George, going through these is helpful so people can see kind of what the new and latest and greatest technology is out there.
A lot of platforms give you the ability to look at communications connections. You can see who's communicated with whom via email, how much, how frequently, how many messages. You can look at it over time. This is a slightly different presentation of that. So in this one, it's showing for Vince Kaminsky, whom we are all way too familiar with from the Enron data set, which would never be released in today's world. People who fall into several different groups. Close confidants, people he's communicating with quite a bit and in great depth. Tenuous connections, ones that aren't as deep, if you will, as robust or as frequent. And then you can look at external communications, not just who within Enron he was communicating, but who outside of Enron he was communicating with. These are different ways of figuring out who's been communicating with whom, how much, and in what fashion. It's part of what we all need to figure out on every matter we work with. So this is yet another tool, AI-driven, to help you accomplish that work.
Before we move on to the next one, Joy, I want to know, so can you explain why data type matters, like with this searching? Like, is this going to work for all of my data? Like, do I just process it all and run it through everything?
I think that's what you're, again, the concept of knowing what you have so you know what and where to search, right? Like, so if you're communicating a lot through Slack, and we process Slack, those files are held differently in metadata. They're different fields that you can search upon versus typical email. But even within that, we enrich email usually when we process data. So there's going to be additional fields that you can gather, like domain extraction, entity extraction, names formalization, things that you could utilize. For example, regular expression. If you know that there's if we do some law enforcement work, right? So if we have badge numbers that we're looking for, or if you have driver's licenses or things that you're looking for that you need to find, it matters so you can understand how to best construct those search terms, or even know where you can find enriched information or even hidden information that you don't even know exists. For example, the IP hops when an email is going through different places. So I guess for me is not all data is the same. And cell phone data, or the way it's collected, UDFR, there are different kinds of reports that are provided by our forensic people. Take a look at those. Don't just say, oh, just give me the body text, that's all I want. Well, really, because did you not know the time and who else was copied on it? And they were sending emojis, but things that you can't see, or pictures that aren't going to be seen immediately as just body text. So you have to look at things in context and understand what you actually have access to. So when we talked about search terms, I keep talking about doing the math. Right? How did we get there? Can you show me? And I break down the queries because I think Christine mentioned like Atlanta or whatever the term that actually constricts everything or that's wrong. There goes a lot. I mean, people talk about how do I do this affordably? Well, just start small and take a look at what you actually have and then branch out. I think that's the big thing. For corporations, when you have so much data and you don't even know half the people anymore because you have thousands of people and you're just collecting globally or even keeping things regionally because of data privacy stuff, but you still have to figure out and interview people so you can start to get to know what the data is about. So I think Slack, we're doing a lot of Teams work now, right? People are still text messaging. I find that some clients actually avoid email. It's more convenient for them to be text messaging, and we didn't realize, oh, what phone are they using? And that kind of stuff. So I think that the data does matter. Data type matters.
Yeah, and Joy, you made a really good point about corporations having a lot of data sources, but individuals have a lot of data sources now. So even if your client is an individual, their phone, their mobile device is a mini computer. And so there are just so many data sources that you need to take into consideration. And when you're trying to, again, find that evidence, make sure you're asking that individual, well, where did you take your notes? Are you using an app that you downloaded? Because there are a lot of great apps out there that people use to manage their life. And so you just need to make sure you're asking those questions.
Family law, sorry, Rose, real quick, because family law, I think I've been getting a lot of inquiries about family law. And again, if you have stipulations on different things, there are tools at least to do a preliminary poll on things so you can start to look at stuff before you even go down the road of knowing if there's information there. Preserve a copy, obviously, of the material, but there are things that you can do that are low cost, little utilities, just to start searching, even DOS. I mean, I was telling someone you could do some DOS commands and find things, and that's free. So there's a lot out there.
Christine, what are your thoughts?
Oh, is this about the question that just came in or on the first one?
Well, the first one, but if you want to talk about the question that just came in, which one is that?
I was just reading. It was the one about the data locations.
Yeah, do you want to take that one?
Let me jump to that one because I think
Okay.
it's really good. So the question was, how do you suggest using data location as a potential means for searching? And I think that's a really good point, and it's one that folks often miss. A lot of times, if I am interested in a particular witness, and it's either a witness that I'm defending, an employee of my client, or if I'm taking a deposition of, and a witness's files have been produced to me. A lot of times, one of the first things I will do is I will go and I will look at the file paths that have been produced for that person. Either, just because I want to, if they're coming from something where they have organized it themselves, either their hard drive or their email folders or other types of data that allow for self-organization. Sometimes you'll be shocked as to what you can find in there. They might have a folder that says 2007 problem. Okay, I'm going to go look at that one if my case is about a 2007 problem. And so, folks forget, that the structure that is given to data by a custodian themselves can be really important, and you can go ahead and glean information from that. Sometimes you also see things like, documents from the lawyer, and then you have a different problem. But using those structures is really important. And so that's, another reason why you should never kind of agree to go at this without metadata or, without all of the tools that are available to you through data that have been collected electronically. Yeah.
Thank you. We might have time for one or two more of these. George, do you want to talk about extracted entities?
Sure. Joy had mentioned extracted entities before. One of the challenges we face and have faced for a long time is that no one of us anymore just uses one email address or one form of communication. It helps to have a system that is able to search for all those different permutations, pull them together, and associate them with a single person. That's an example of what we have here. Because we're working with the Enron data, this is all just email. But you want to see if you can do that type of thing with other forms of communication as well, so that when you go in and search for Joy, you're going to find Joy in all her various permutations, and not just via one email address.
Well, and I think too, George, where we found this to be helpful, it provides context to maybe a text message or a short form message, IM. So what I mean by that is you might be texting about something at the same time an email string is going on. And on the text, you're saying what you really feel. In the email, you're being more professional. And sometimes you can kind of tie that back and understand what's going on. And so the extracted entities allows you to do that if you, again, are looking across not only email, but also the other data sources like instant messaging or text messages. And let's talk about business cards.
So Rose, just real quick, someone's asking about how the context of it all, but you mentioned it, right? Pulling everything together, all the disparate data types, pulling it together, pivoting off of date, normalizing names so that things are looking to you as a common name, because it can get a little hairy looking at different things, and phone numbers, right? Normalize things on phone numbers. This is Joy's phone number, so that you're seeing things in context, and then again, text message, Slack, everything that you're looking at as time is going, because I think we all are trying to tell a story, and you're trying to see what's happening at the same time. So I would pivot off of date, I would normalize names, and I would also, again, bring in all the disparate data types together in a view so you can try and map it out.
No, I think that's a great point. And what you need to do is put yourself in the shoes of the user. So how do you think that person's actually using these different data sources to communicate? And then try to create and craft your culling and your searching in a similar way. All right, so business cards.
And what we have here is one more way in which AI can be used to pull together disparate pieces of information and present them in what can be, at least in the right situation, a much more usable form. So that you see that, you know, Kenley is down on the bottom right-hand side communicating with a negative sentiment during business hours, and this happened. This particular type of thing happened 57 times over a single week. So you've got a pattern of behavior that you might or might not want to look at more closely. This is just another way of looking at the results of what the AI platforms can help locate and pull together for you.
Excellent. Well, I don't see Bill, but I imagine he's going to be joining any second now. As our time is wrapping up. So let's just try to, maybe we can get to model libraries.
Sure. One of the things you can do with supervised machine learning is create models. You say, I want to find everything related to fill in the blank topic. And you do it by feeding content to reviewers. They look at the content and say, yes, it's related to that, or no, it's not. The more they do that, the more the machine learns about that, the more you're able to build a model. You can take a model, use it across multiple cases. Each time you use it, it becomes richer, more robust. You can move that model not just across cases, but even across organizations. That's the idea here. Building a model that you can pick up and use over and over and use elsewhere as well.
Rose?
Yes.
I'm here. Thanks.
I knew you were on your way.
Yes, thanks for a wonderful panel, everyone. Very insightful, very informative. It's amazing where things are going with search and information retrieval. So thanks again. Appreciate it. For the audience, hang on. We're going to take a 10-minute break. Then we're coming back right during the noon hour with 4 special presentations, starting with Craig Ball, going to Jared Concilio, Doug Austin, and Maribel Rivera, giving you insight on what's happening in the industry. So stay with us. Back in 10 minutes, noon proper. See you then. Bye-bye.